achieved.
So let's be honest, Michelle Prahesh, whatever you want to say, I can't pronounce it correctly, couldn't have looked stupider. And I usually don't call out fighters for acting like this, but this was ridiculous. He's fighting a guy in 5 days' notice who's coming up a weight class. The Brazilian misses weight and then proceeds to act like a dancing clown in the lead-up to the fight, choreographing his walk-in, he basically killed a whole round of cardio by acting like an idiot before the fight started while Bruce Buffer's introducing him. And then Tristan Connolly, hats off to the guy, steps in, makes the money, and then the best part about it is, fight of the night, he takes home both sides of it, $100,000, good for him, that's fantastic. I don't know how far Tristan Connolly's going to go. We've seen a lot of guys who make a short notice debut, especially when they go up in weight class. When they go back to their natural weight class, they just don't have the time. But he's already had the highlight of his career right there, picking up that victory. Now, I had picked initially Paige to win by finish and threw that on a couple of my bets, which really pissed me off because up to that point I was doing quite well. Overall, I went 9-2, and I was quite happy with my performance, which we'll talk about momentarily. But just you look at fighters, you go, what are you thinking? What is your motivation? You are at the top level of the UFC. If you have you're at top level of mixed martial arts. If you have any performance drop off, your opponent's going to capitalize on it, and you're going to look like a donkey. I would actually be very fine if they cut him based on that performance and they said to him, hey, look, we can't have that happen again. You go down to the regional scene, you fight a couple of times and show us you take this a little more seriously, and then we'll call you back. But if that's not the case, whatever. But either way, it was very frustrating to watch that transpire. You don't put bets on guys like that. I made the mistake of trying to get a little bit of value out of it by taking the straight-up finish. It just didn't go down like that. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. Always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we are breaking in the upcoming UFC Fight Night 159, which will go down in Mexico City, Mexico on September 21st. I'll be giving you my 5 main card predictions for this on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. And talk about breaking out of a slump. We went 9-2 last show. Huge night, huge night. The betting packs were on fire. Overall, the casual betting cluster won 98. And the HBC won 161 units. That's huge numbers. When you look at my hardcore betting cluster, obviously I had Glover Teixeira as my number one play. I had Justin Gaethje and Jeff Hughes combined together. Jeff Hughes void coming off the board. I also had Hunter Azure pulling off the upset as my number one silver play. I had Sakai and Serkinov paired together also in the silver play. I had Uriah Hall in my bronze play as well. Jordan Griffin, the only fighter in my top plays that did not come through. And then if you go all the way down to the bottom, I did have in my wildcard play Miles John, Glover Teixeira, and Hunter Azure to come together as well. Then when you go to my casual betting cluster, also cashing in huge with Gaethje and Teixeira in my gold play, obviously Hughes coming off the board. My silver play, Sakai, Serkinov, and Azure also pairing up quite nicely. And then you go down to my bronze plays, Johns, Uriah Hall, and Hubbard scoring. It was just a great overall night. And then the previously mentioned Sakai, Teixeira, and Azure also cashing into the bronze play there. Again, casual bettors, guys who want to bet $50, $100 on one night. Other people who want to bet bigger amounts, that's for the hardcore betting cluster. My betting packs will be for sale again. $15 for a full betting breakdown, or you can pick up a subscription where you save yourself anywhere from $15 to $20, which will be posted in the bet shop. Please check that out. It usually goes up Thursday night into Friday morning. Again, we're coming up a fantastic show. We're going to try and get things rebounded again. I had a couple down shows, but overall this year's been, it started off a little bit slow. We got rolling. We put some wins together, and now we had a bit of a drop off again, and I'm going to hopefully turn it around here. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions if you're curious and tuning into my during the show fights. And of course I always post all my stuff on Twitter as well, so people can get the first my Twitter followers get the first shot at anything that goes live. Please subscribe to me as well on YouTube. You can click the subscribe button and the notification button so you get another first-hand look at my content. And I apologize, this video is a little bit late getting up. I had a few things come up with school where I actually get paid to do things and I'm work. But we're on top of things now, and let's get to that first main card prediction. Fight number 1 of the main cards transpires in the UFC's featherweight division as the 12-2-0 Martin Bravo takes on 17-8 Steven Peterson. Now, both fighters are coming off losses to Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres. Bravo lost by split decision in a fight that I felt he probably should have won, even though I had Caceres. And then Steven Peterson lost a unanimous decision. I had Peterson in that matchup, so I got that one wrong as well. or I got that one wrong. I felt Peterson did a lot. Could have very well earned a split and possibly could have stolen that fight. But hey, I do see, going back and watching a second time, how Caceres got the nod in that one. Now, both guys come into this matchup having lost back-to-back fights. It was the first 2 defeats of Bravo's career. For Peterson, he's 3-5 in his last 8 matchups, including a 1-3 stretch inside the octagon. Looking at Peterson first. He is 2 inches taller. He'll have a 1-inch reach. Actually, a 1-inch reach advantage for Bravo. Bravo is the younger man by 3 years, but he has been out of action for 14 months, but he is fighting at home. So there's a bunch of variables there, both going for and against Martin. Now, Bravo has finished 9 of his 11 wins by knockout. 9 of his 11 wins by finish. 4 by knockout, 5 by submission. He won his debut by TKO. Then he got brutally and abruptly knocked out by Humberto Bandanay before losing that controversial split decision to Bruce Leroy. He will be looking to get back on track here at home. When he fought Bruce Leroy, he did his best work when he pressured Caceres. Came forward, put his punches together. He has a solid straight right. He was snapping Caceres' head back every time he did it, and I felt he was turning that fight in his favor when he did that. He was looking for takedowns with some success. He was muscling his attempts a little bit, but he's able to get Caceres down and score some points that way. Defensively, Bravo was getting hit every time Caceres opened up with a left hand. He did much better when he was going forward. Once he was waiting on Caceres, it seemed like that's when he was taking the most damage. So again, he needs to be the forward first fighter in this fight. Now, he definitely slowed down in the later stages. He was tired, but he was still engaging and having some success. Now, when you look at Peterson, he put up some decent volume on Caceres, standing and trading, but again, not amazing. He took him down in the first round, got right to his back, held back mount for a prolonged period in the first round, had a near rear naked choke, more of a face, trying to crush his face, but at the same time, he did hold the position fairly well. He has taken down all 4 of his UFC opponents, completing 9 overall in 4 fights. So, yeah, for the most part, he's shown he can wrestle when need be, but obviously with a 1-3 record, it's not been enough to get him multiple victories. The best round against Caceres was his opening round. He started to fade after that, never found nearly as much success in the rest of the fight. Now, he is willing to take damage, and that seems to be an issue with Peterson. He's willing to take damage to land offense. He gave up 114 significant strikes against Brandon Davis in his debut. He gave up 94 against Caceres and let him pull, and Caceres pulled away as a result. In that matchup, he struggled with the lateral movement of Alex. He's following too much, not cutting off the cage, just kind of circling around and devoiding himself of some energy and not actually getting any reward for it by landing shots. That shouldn't be as much of an issue here against Martin Bravo, who likes to stand in the pocket and trade and just basically throw down with him. But the thing is, Peterson needs to make his pressure effective. If he is just walking forward and getting hit 2, 3, 4 times and only landing 1 or 2 strikes, it's going to add up, and the judges are not going to view that favorably, and that's one he has to be very mindful of here. When you look at his decision record, that's a concern. He is 5-8 in decisions. That's a tough record to have as a fighting at the top level. He's gone to split decision 3 times, losing 2 of them, including a 1-1 record in the big show. Not a great track record, and especially when you consider he's going into enemy territory, a place where a close fight could very well go to the local fighter. Bravo and Peterson offer a lot of similar styles, guys that will wrestle, guys that will trade, guys that like to come forward and throw down. I think Bravo's a little more effective with his offense. His punching power seems to be a little bit more spot on. I would say Peterson's the more durable fighter, but Bravo's only been stopped once, and was that flash knockout against Bandanay. There is some concern, though, that Peterson could land takedowns and be the better wrestler and out-maneuver Bravo, but this is going to be a close back and forth fight, especially in the first round. But I think with Peterson fighting at elevation at Mexico City, a place he's not familiar with, for a guy who relies on cardio, for a guy that relies on being able to push a pace, if he has any complications from this environment, I think it's going to cost him huge. We saw he made some bad decisions, didn't have nearly as much success against Caceres in rounds 2 and 3. I think something similar happens here. I think Bravo's just going to edge him out, landing better shots over the final 2 rounds and just making him pay for that forward pressure. Bravo mixes it up a little bit better, is a little bit more defensively responsible, and my prediction is Martin Bravo to defeat Steven Peterson by decision. Our first of 2 ladies' fights on the main card transpires in the UFC's featherweight division, as the 10th ranked Irene Aldana of Mexico, coming into this matchup with a record of 10-5, takes on the 9-5 short notice replacement Vanessa Melo, I believe fighting out of Brazil. Now, Melo is replacing Marion Renault on 1 week's notice. This is one of those situations where Renault pulled out at the last moment and was just not and we had to find someone, so Melo gets the call. Aldana comes into this matchup having won 3 in a row, including a split decision for Lucy Pudilova and a submission victory for Bethe Ojeda, before losing a very close split decision against Raquel Pennington. I had Pennington in that fight, very happy. I think I actually had all 3 of those fights right. This is the first time we've seen Aldana Aldana fighting in Mexico in the UFC, and the first time she's been there since 2013. Now, for Melo, she has won 4 in a row, 6 of 7. She's actually a natural flyweight, which could give her some issues if these two girls lock up. But at the same time, it'll help her to deal with the short notice weight cut. Aldana is 4 inches taller. They are the same age. And again, I feel like Aldana is a pretty big 135, or at least a rangy one. And she hits hard, and that could be an issue for Melo in this fight. Now, Melo's already fought twice in 2019, which is pretty solid. She's 2-0 overall. But her record's not great when you look at it, 9-5. But she started her pro career 3-4, so you see the adjustments and how it's led to success. 2 submission wins. She's 7-4 in the scorecards. She's certainly starting to find more success in this stage of her career. Now, she has gone the distance in split decisions 4 times with a 2-2 record. She has won her last 2, and she has 5-1 in her last 6 decisions, which again tells us she's learning how to win fights that she can't finish. And she doesn't finish a lot. So I guess that's a crucial skill, is learning how to put yourself in a position to have it be viewed by the judges as the better fighter. And when you look at her last 3 opponents, they're solid, 27 wins, 15 losses, and she has a win over UFC fighter Molly McCann coming back in 2015, so it's not like she's been fighting complete scrubs all the way along. Now, when you watch her in cage, again, I didn't see a lot of footage on her, especially not some recent stuff. She's not an overly dynamic fighter. She's a bit of a grinder. She'll strike, close the distance. She appears to lack the wrestling to really take her opponents down once she gets on the inside, and that results in her getting stalled out on the cage periodically. Despite her long fight experience, the lack of preparation, I think, could be a major concern, especially when you figure in the fact that it's debuting and we're in Mexico City. We're at that extreme altitude, which is going to be a theme of this entire show. So there's a lot of concern here that she's going to be compromised, lack of time to prep, debut factor, and then fighting in a place that is just brutal on your conditioning and cardio, even for the most conditioned fighters. Now, when you look at Aldana, she is a capable striker with stopping power. No UFC knockouts, though, just the one submission over against Bethe Correia. Now, she has had issues with fights that go beyond the first round, losing several, but she started to find more success in recent fights, again, being one of those fighters who's adapting and growing and showing us there's more to her than what we initially thought. She is very strong offensively and very aggressive and does a lot of damage when she lands, but defensively she is she's vulnerable. She gets hit a lot. She's given up 100+ strikes on 3 separate occasions, and those have been costly fights where she just didn't do enough defensively to avoid her opponent's offense and lost those fights as a result. Now, she should have a market edge in the striking here. She should be the type of girl who can put damage on Melo, and Melo's going to struggle to close the distance or walk into punches because she is trying to close the distance aggressively. We have seen at times Aldana, especially against Pennington, struggle with the pressure. Her opponent's ability to close the distance and be right in her face. And if Melo opts to go that direction and can do it for a full 3 rounds, hats off to her. She can win this matchup. We saw the success of the aforementioned Tristan Connolly on short notice when he appeared overmatched against an opponent that should have wiped the floor with him. Connolly just powered through and just was the better fighter, the more persistent, and took that win away. Could Vanessa Melo do the same thing? It's possible. I feel like Aldana is simply a better striker overall. She should be able to hurt Melo on the feet, who has been knocked out in one of her defeats. I think Melo's going to struggle with the late notice to capitalize on, and that's the thing. Aldana, she's had issues outside of the first round, but I don't think Melo, despite her long fight experience, will have the ability to capitalize on that in rounds 2 and 3 if her cardio starts to falter, which I anticipate it will with all the factors we previously mentioned. So even if Aldana slows down, I think Melo will slow down harder. I think Aldana is going to hurt her, keep engaging, and eventually get her first UFC knockout. So my prediction is Irene Aldana to defeat Vanessa Melo by knockout. The rejuvenated flyweight division will play host another fight. I think they actually have 2 fights on the night, as the assassin baby Brandon Moreno, currently ranked 9th in the division, returns to the UFC with a record of 14-5-0 to take on the debuting Askar Bullet Askarov, who currently holds an undefeated record at 10 wins and no losses. Now, Moreno is returning after 1 win on the regional scene. He won it in Legacy. He won the title in Legacy with a 4th round knockout. He had lost back-to-back fights against Sergio Pettis and Alexander Pantoja prior to getting let go when the UFC seemed to be, cutting loose the flyweights. This is a good re-pickup, I think. For Askarov, he's undefeated. It's his UFC debut, but he hasn't fought in 16 months. And he's fighting again in Mexico City, where Moreno is from, so he will certainly be the fan favorite. Moreno is 1 inch tall. Moreno is the taller fighter, by 1 inch, and he is also 1 year younger. Now, both fighters come into this matchup with a high submission totals. Moreno, 10 of his 15 wins have come by submission. For Askarov, 7 of his 10 victories have also come by way of tap out. When you look at the specifics, Moreno 4 wins by rear naked choke. Askarov's got 3 RNCs in his record. He's also got several other chokes in his record. So you see both guys have, are looking for chokes, usually looking for your neck or your throat to try and put you away. Now, Askarov has fought some decent competition. He submitted former Bellator fighter Anthony Leone, also former UFC fighter Jose Maria Tome, whatever his name is. I remember him fighting the UFC. Didn't have a great run. He had a little bit of success. But either way, he's picked up some wins over some names. Askarov, now in his most recent fight that I've seen, he was taken down early, but he attacked off his back. He had a tight Kimura early on. His hips are very active once he's taken down, but he's still on his back. Eventually, he's able to work his way back to his feet, but we see him get taken down on multiple occasions. I do like how active he is off his back, but it's not something you want to rely on routinely, especially at this level. He will use submissions to get on top and sweep or threaten and force his opponent into a position where he can get out of. That's good. He's also very good in a scramble. I've seen him sprawl out of takedown attempts, and kind of a Sambo background is what he's drawing on there, and work to top position and lock up chokes from those positions. Again, watch out, especially if he stuffs the takedown, watch out he doesn't go for your neck. On the feet, pretty wide strikes, nothing too impressive. Didn't see a heck of a lot of striking, but it seems like he's focused on closing the distance as he will throw and immediately push forward. He seems pretty active wherever he goes, and he'll maintain that consistent pace and output with his offense, and that is crucial to his success. And ultimately, it's just get him in a position to finish his opponent. Now, for Moreno, he's young. Maybe he was rushed a little bit too soon as far as he had some success early in his UFC career. He got put in that main event in Mexico City against Sergio Pettis, a fight that I picked Pettis to win, and he basically had a good start and then fell apart, and Pettis took a decision in that matchup. Now, after the second loss in that run, he then went to the LFA and won their championship in a 4-round fight via TKO. Very good experience builder to go down to a promotion like that, which is a very solid promotion, and win a title in a fight that lasts beyond the 3-round mark. That really helps to build some confidence and shows as a fighter he's doing the right things. Now, Moreno's wrestling for the most part has been pretty solid. Against Pantoja, 2 takedowns, 4 against Pettis, 5 against Benoit back in the day. The only real blemish on that was he lost the takedown battle 4-0 against Dustin Ortiz in a fight where he lost the early stages of that matchup before rallying out of it. Moreno's also a very opportunistic submission game. Grappler. He likes to jump on stuff when you give it to him, and he is good at capitalizing and making you pay if you make a small mistake. On the feet, he's got some pretty good pop in his hands, and he's capable of hurting his opponents. We saw him hurt Ortiz prior to getting the finish in that fight. When he fought Pettis, I feel like Moreno faded a little bit in that matchup, and Pettis was just the more sharp striker and was able to capitalize on it. I think Moreno needs to come out strong here and realize this is a second opportunity in the UFC, second opportunity to fight at home and be successful. As far as I can see, Askarov just gives up too much, especially in the first round. He gives up too many takedowns. He's a bit of a slow starter, and I think his cardio could be a major issue at the altitude factor because he's a guy who gets behind and then relies on his late push to get back into it. Well, if he starts to get tired, especially with Moreno grinding on him on the mat, that's going to be very difficult and probably he becomes more susceptible to being taken down. You add in the fact that he's returning after a 16-month layoff and debuting, it's not a good scenario for this guy. Moreno should be the better fighter to be suited, despite the fact that he, has been fought in the States recently. He should be the more suited to deal with this situation, more acclimatized to the environment. Askarov's giving up too many takedowns early, I think, in this fight. I think he's going to struggle to mount that comeback later. Moreno also has the edge on the feet, I feel, if needed. If he opts to stand and bang, if he keeps Askarov off the mat, I think that's also a scenario he could capitalize on. And again, winning in Mexico will be difficult for foreign fighters, especially in a close fight. So my prediction is Brandon Moreno to defeat Askarov by decision. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's strawweight division, my apologies, as the former champion, the Cookie Monster, the 8th-ranked Carla Esparza, 14-6-0, battles the 9th-ranked Mexican fighter, the 10-2 Alexa Grasso. Now, Esparza is coming off a win after back-to-back defeats to Claudia Gadelha and Tatiana Suarez, 2 of the top fighters in the division. She's still trying to work her way back, but you can see she's kind of trending downward as a former champion who just probably isn't going to be able to break through and contend for a title before her career draws to a conclusion. For Grasso, she is working towards an opportunity. She looked good against Karolina Kowalkiewicz, winning a decision. She was dominated by Tatiana Suarez previously to that. Had a split decision victory over Irene and Marcos. I had Marcos in that fight. I thought it was a good close fight. I really thought it could have gone either way. It was a little upset with the decision, but I can tolerate it now. And that was the last time we actually saw Grasso in Mexico City, was fighting against Reina Marcos. Now, physically, Grasso 4 inches taller than Esparza. She'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, and she is 6 years younger. So all the physical intangibles certainly favoring the local fighter, which also is a huge advantage. Now, ultimately this fight comes down to Grasso's striking attack against Esparza's wrestling. Who can gain the edge and force their opponent to compete more in that person's realm of significance? Esparza is coming off a 4 takedown victory. She is 5-1 when she lands at least 2 takedowns in a fight. Now, she gave up 4 against Claudio Gadelha, and that's the only fight she's landed at least 2 and not 1. So in order for her to land takedowns and not win, her opponent must land more. At least that's the numbers we're seeing here. Now, Grasso can be taken down. She gave up 2 takedowns against Felice Herrig, 4 against Randa Marcos, and 2 against Tatiana Suarez. So it is possible to see her put on the mat. Esparza got back to her roots in her last fight. Solid double leg, blast through her opponent's legs, once on the mat, work her top control, advance position, land strikes, look for submission opportunities. That's what she did in that fight, and she was able to take out a short notice opponent who's also ground oriented. Now, Grasso is coming off her first fight where her opponent attempted 0 takedowns, and she put up 148 significant strikes, and that has been an area. We've seen Suarez. Suarez landed 2 of 3 takedowns. Herrig landed 2 of 4. Marcos went 4 for 11. Grasso has a tendency to be a little more timid, a little more limited in her striking offense when she's facing takedowns. That has to be an issue here. Her footwork looked excellent against Carolina, bouncing around in the cage, landing solid volume with pop, and I think that's certainly going to be a factor here. Her kicking attack is very good, but she needs to be mindful against the attempts for Carla Esparza to get in close and take her down. Both girls can spend some time in the other's area and still win this fight. If Carla is forced to strike, she will need a couple of takedowns to augment her output, but certainly put pressure on Grasso and land and work her jab and just be more active. If Grasso is taken down, she has to scramble back to her feet and then outwork Carla on the feet to nullify any points the takedown scored. The altitude, again, I'd say is a major concern for Carla Esparza. She will expend a lot of energy looking for takedowns in this fight. If we see in round 2, I think we're going to see if Carla Esparza looks for takedowns in round 1, I think we're going to see Grasso force her to work hard. She might get taken down a couple of times, but I think ultimately Esparza is going to start to slow down, and that's when Grasso, similar to the Marcos fight, starts to take over in rounds 2 and 3, starts to land more, starts to hurt Esparza, back her up, and just use her speed and superior boxing skills to really take this fight over. Esparza is going to need a lot of top control time to overcome the volume of Grasso. She's going to need to nullify it by being on top a lot. I don't think she gets it in the last 2 rounds. I think the altitude takes a factor here, and my prediction is Alexa Grasso to defeat Carla Esparza by decision. We move now to the main event of the evening. We're in the UFC's featherweight division. As the 7th-ranked El Pantera Yair Rodriguez, 12-2-0, fighting out of Mexico, takes on Little Heathen Jeremy Stephens, ranked 8th in the division, with a record of 28 wins and 16 losses. Now, coming into this matchup, Rodriguez has won 9 of his last 10. He's only lost in that span against Frankie Edgar. He had that late knockout against the Korean Zombie. I had Yair in that matchup. I felt he was on his way to losing a decision, but it was very close. He also has wins against BJ Penn, Alex Caceres, Andre Fili, and Dan Hooker in that stretch. For Jeremy Stephens, he's lost back-to-back fights to Zabit Magomed Shapirov. Very good fight there. A very good fighter. Very good fight, I thought, as well. He also lost to Jose Aldo, getting stopped with that wicked body shot. Prior to that, he had wins over Josh Emmett, Dong Yu Choi, and Gilbert Melendez. Then he had losses to Moicano, Edgar, and Max Holloway mixed in there as well. He is 5-7 in his last 12 fights, but he's fought top-level competition. So you have to keep that in mind as well. When you compare them against BJ Penn and Bruce Leroy, you have to understand. So, yeah, it's hard to compare as far as Rodriguez's recent success because he has faced lesser competition than what Jeremy Stephens has been doing with. But obviously, we could see a transitional period here where Rodriguez faces Stephens, passes him by, and goes on to face better competition. Physically, Rodriguez 2 inches taller, though the same reach. The Mexican fighter is 6 years younger, but he has been out of action for 10 months, and he is fighting at home. So a number of variables there as well. Now, Rodriguez's first 2 UFC fights were in Mexico. That was 4 years ago. He went 2-0 in that time, but it included a split decision win over Charles Rosa in a very close fight. Stephens, when you look at him first, the first thing that everyone talks about, 19 wins by knockout. He's got brutal finishing power. Comparable, Rodriguez is that flashy, dynamic striker, high-flying kicks, and a very impressive arsenal. That reverse upward elbow that took out KZ was unbelievable. Just crazy with 1 second on the clock. You can't get much more last minute than that, more impressive than that. But that's what we're looking at here, a very interesting stylistic matchup. Now, Stephens is coming off a fight against a long, dynamic striker in Zabit. And I thought he looked good. Ultimately, what he did in that fight was he forced Zabit to go to his wrestling. He forced Zabit to abandon that vertical based game and take him down. Now, with Stephens, he's got big power. We know that. He needs to avoid headhunting. He needs to avoid making that into an actual negative and headhunting and getting simplistic and predictable. His pressure has looked good. He cuts off the cage. He was pressuring Zabit very effectively, pressuring through some of those techniques, and that's what he needs to do here against Yair, is push forward and not allow Yair to set up some of those spinning techniques and some of those bigger kicks he likes to throw and some of those hand techniques as well, and stay right in his face and force him to simplify his offense and force him to have to work reactively. We've also seen with Stephens is while he doesn't want to get into a kicking match with Rodriguez, he's got some very solid low kicks. It's been a nice addition to his game. And again, it could take away some of the mobility. If he can land a couple of those early on Yair, it's going to compromise his mobility, and that's absolutely a factor here. When, again, as he said, he forced Zabit to go to his wrestling in that fight because of the pressure, and that's an area that Stephens has struggled with, but I do not anticipate him having issues with Rodriguez. I don't think Rodriguez is going to be blasting double legs on him and taking him down. In fact, Stephens has shown he can wrestle offensively. Again, I don't know if we're going to see that either because Rodriguez's takedown defense is so good, but it's something worth looking at. Now, when Rodriguez against the Korean Zombie, he came out throwing some very functional hard low kicks. He was focusing on being a smart fighter and avoiding those big offensive techniques early on, realizing it's 5 rounds. It could very well take him 24 minutes and 59 seconds to get the Korean Zombie out of there. You cannot blow your load in that first round and then expect to hold on. I would anticipate he would look for something similar here against Jeremy Stephens, a guy who needs to close the distance and throw those bombs. What with the Korean Zombie, where he had success, especially early, with pressure. He was coming forward with those flurries, backing him up. He was actually hurting Yair and forcing him to kind of just go all defensive and get out of there as quickly as he possibly could. But the Korean Zombie, again, when he was staying at range, that's when Yair can set up his dynamic strikes. That's when he can set up his offense and he can go to work. Rodriguez needs time to set up those techniques. His jab is good. He throws a lot of single strikes. He likes to pick his spots, and Stephens needs to prevent that from happening. What we did see, though, which Stephens needs to be very mindful of here, is Rodriguez is very good with countering. He throws spinning elbows. He turns your pressure against you and makes you walk into his offense. And if he can do that against Stephens, that's going to be a very effective technique and could ultimately end the fight. Zombie started to find success in that matchup in round 3, pressing more. He still needs more aggression. I think Stephens is capable of doing that. And when you look at the 5-round experience, Stephens had the 2014 loss against Cub Swanson. He's had main events against Doo-Ho Choi and Josh Emmett, ending both of them by second-round knockout. I would think he needs something similar here. He needs to pressure, go all out, get Rodriguez hurt, and just keep pouring it on. Yair went 5 rounds against KZ. He had the 5-round main event against Alex Caceres, a fight that was a split decision victory, and of course the finish against BJ Penn as well, which was well before the 5-round limit had expired. Fighting at elevation, again, could be a huge issue. We're in Mexico City, could compromise the cardio on both sides. Jeremy has gone out to Mexico City early. He went out 6 weeks to help adjust. Actually, he's fighting in a location that's a higher elevation than Mexico City, hoping that coming down will help him to adjust. So that might not be a factor for him. I've also heard it takes several months to adjust, upwards to a year, before you're truly capable and feeling good at fighting at altitude. So we'll have to wait and see. If Yair can stay at range and land his kicks and keep Jeremy on the outside to set up his and force him to set his offense out from long range, I think this is Rodriguez's fight to win all day. Rodriguez is fighting at home, which is huge, but it could also put a lot of added pressure on him. I like how aggressive Stephens is, and especially how he was Jeremy Stephens was in the last fight. He's pretty damn durable, even though he got finished by, I think Eve Edwards knocked him out way back in the day, and of course Aldo taking him with the body shot. A lot of big fight experience for Jeremy Stephens. I think that's going to help him out here. I think he's going to cut off the cage very effectively. He's going to wade forward. He's going to make this fight ugly. Similar to what he did against Choi, similar to what he did against Emmett. He's going to get in the pocket, he's going to throw bombs, and he's going to force Yair Rodriguez to just scrap it out with him and not make this a technical fight. Stephens needs to keep pressing and maintaining it until he gets the finish, he gets finished, or that 25 minutes is up. That's the key here. Press forward, make Yair Rodriguez fight a fight he's not comfortable with. And I think we get a little bit of an upset here. And my prediction is Jeremy Stephens to defeat Yair Rodriguez by knockout. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 159 in Mexico City. I'll be giving you all my preliminary picks available at kamikazeoverdrive.net throughout the week, so please check them out. I greatly appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. My website has as much stuff available. My bet packs coming off a massive, massive successful night. Huge night. We'll see if we can keep it rolling here. We're going to keep things a little more simple. We're going to go simplify even a little more than last time, and we'll see how that turns out. Other than that, we keep rolling. I think we're in the middle. I think someone said we're at fight 6 or 7 of a 12 consecutive weekend schedule for the UFC. I love it, but at the same time, it can, and I miss it when there's not a fight. But at the same time, I wouldn't mind a week off here or there. But I can't bring myself to miss a show. I try and I've put every show out I've done for 10 years, almost 10 years. Why stop now? Thank you for tuning in, guys. I greatly appreciate it, and enjoy the fights. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care.